Hello, everybody. It is me, Root Beer. I'm back in my usual spot. Anyways, we have skipped the podcast this week because Atlas is attending his sister's wedding rehearsal, so, you know. Instead, we get to have another episode of the Root Beer News Corner. So, there are a couple things I want to cover this time. First one is the card that we have up on screen here, the new Avant-Garde Blue Deathster Sky Blitzer Avant-Garde Richter. So, has an act ability in the hand. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you can reveal it, bind the original Avant-Garde from your Vanguard circle, ride this as stand, and until end of turn it gets all of the original act abilities of the card bound for cost. And then auto on Vanguard Circle, at the end of the battle attack, if there's a Sora period in your soul, you can discard 2 from hand, choose the original Avant-Garde from Bind Zone, ride it as stand, and it gets 10k and drive -1 until end of turn. So, this is a very interesting / mildly concerning card because it allows Avant-Garde to get 3 attacks on Vanguard now, so, you know, this can copy the original Avant-Garde's ability, so you would eat the Blitz Order and gain the Restand ability. We're assuming here that you've Persona Road, and then after that, you know, at the end of the second attack, you can just ride the original Avant-Garde from your Bind Zone, and then, you know, you have 3 Vanguard attacks. So, you know, a persistent criticism that I've had of D format is that, you know, there's been a distinct lack of defensive power. So when they first introduced D, they rolled back some of the power changes that was introduced in V. So grade 1s are no longer 10k shield, heals are only 15 instead of 20 now, and, you know, they would just kind of continue coming out with the same level of power that we had around V era, but they wouldn't increase the shield value. So early on, this was a problem with, like, Bruce and Bastion being the best decks by far because, you know, they were these powerful aggro decks and no one had enough defensive power to kind of stop it. And, you know, nowadays we have new issues of, like, you have the mass decks that can activate Persona Ride early. You have things like Gondiva and Chronojet that can scale their power really high, and so, you know, we have tons of decks now getting into like 30, 40k columns while also making like 4 or 5 attacks. Meanwhile, defensive power is still kind of in the kiddie pool of like plus 5,000 shield, you know? So, you know, they keep designing cards that even if they have defensive abilities, it's not like too much. They seem very reluctant to make non-triggers go over 10k. And also, like, a lot of cards that are designed to be defensive, that's, like, all that they do. So if your deck can't supply the offensive power normally, you know, those defensive cards just might not have a place in the deck because, you know, they're not helping you win the game, right? And so, you know, my concern reading this card is that we're still at this, like, middling to low defensive power. You know, the few really big defensive cards that go up to 25k all kind of have their own caveats. So there's, like, the Regalis Order, which conflicts with Sanctitude and also takes up your 1 Blitz Order. And in the case of Avant-Garde specifically, you know, this deck has a Blitz Order restriction. And then there's, like, the effect heals, which are both conditional, and, like, the condition might not come up sometimes, and they're just, like, 10k shield if you don't hit it, so, you know, I've never been fond of them. Like, they are seeing, like, occasional play, but I do think a lot of decks also just kind of stick to, like, 4 default heals, because a consistent 15k shield is better than a conditional, sometimes 25k shield. Of course, I do want to be reasonable in my reaction to this card. You know, I predicted back when I think it was Holy Shine Dragon for Gold Paladin that would be like a disaster for V, and it wasn't. So I do want to be a little measured in my take. This card does seem like it's going to be more resource intensive. So, if my math is correct, you are going to come away with one less card in your hand compared to if you're just doing the original Avant-Garde. Obviously, you will run through like more of your deck and you can kind of curate what cards you keep, but at the end of the day, you are coming in like -1 compared to like regular Avant-Garde plays, and then because this is a grade 3 and you're running it alongside the original, you benefit from Persona riding a lot, getting the guaranteed restand. That means you're also running more cards without shield value because you're also playing a lot of order, so it's possible this deck turns out to be like a glass cannon aggro deck in the same vein of something like Drejeweld or like V Overlord, right, where it was just kind of a high roll strategy. So, I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but this kind of just reminds me of the constant concern of shield power in D. The other big news is they've changed the comprehensive rules a little bit, so and they're using this Mega Colony card as an example of this change, where before, when you have cards that modify like a unit's power by like doubling or tripling, normally the power from boosting is counted, but now they've changed the rule so that you increase the power first and then add boost. So this kind of caused a bit of a meltdown within the rulings community, where a lot of people were like, what does this mean for Vanguard now? Because, this ruling kind of conflicts with the idea that, boosting and attacking happen simultaneously. I think this specific card that's being errataed is kind of a bad example for this rule change because, it's increasing its power when it attacks, so by the logic we've always known, if attacking and boosting is simultaneous, then how is it that this card is excluding boost power from its tripling effect? So, apparently, this is a narrow change that's kind of meant to, like, apply only to this specific kind of interaction, so, apparently there's already some rules in place where, like, you consider the power of something before, like, boosting is applied separately for the purposes of, like, increasing power like this, so this change is to just kind of go in line with that. But because Bushiroad has not fully clarified what this actually means for the game, a lot of people are concerned that this has potential ramifications beyond just changing, like, the way power increases work. So, because, attacking and boosting is supposed to be simultaneous, and we're now, like, counting that separately, that would imply that they actually happen at different timings with each other, which would change a lot of things about the game. So it would mean that things that happen, like, on attack and on boost would have to be resolved separately from each other. Used to be, like, because it was simultaneous, you could just kind of choose the order. Now you would have to resolve on attack before on boost. It also means anything with, like, a power threshold when it attacks can no longer count its booster, which would, like, have huge ramifications for things like Great Nature and Dimension Police. Once again, trying to be, like, reasonable about it, I think the intention here is for this change to be very narrow, that it will only affect specifically power increases, so things that, like, double or triple your power, so that those would only apply, like, before boosting, and, like, the mechanic of boost itself is still fine, but, again, needs to be clarified by Bushiroad. Hopefully they realize that the community is kind of freaking out about it, and, respond accordingly. And I will just say, as a comment, like, I'm not a huge fan of this ruling anyways, just because, like, again, it conflicts with the idea that attacking and boosting is simultaneous. I wouldn't be upset if they just rolled this back. I think this ruling is a little unintuitive and would probably cause, like, more questions and confusions than just kind of leaving it. A lot of people are speculating that this change was a knee-jerk reaction because there's some interaction with, like, Silhouette and the Overtrigger so that it can hit, like, 300 million, which, man, it's almost like the Overtrigger is the problem or something. Food for thought. So, that's going to be it for this video. There were some other reveals from the Tuesday stream, but since we're going to be doing the set review on the next podcast episode, I think I'll just leave it for there. You know, I believe Avant-Garde is going to be set 13, so this one's not going to apply. Yeah, set 13, so... You know, that's why we're covering this, and it kind of gives me an opportunity to talk about defensive power in Vanguard just a little bit. Maybe that will become a topic for the podcast in the future, but for now, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.